Good evening, Madam Vice Mayor.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor.
How are you doing today?
Trying to keep from blowing away.
I know. I took Jasper out for a walk today, and I made sure here just in case.
What?
He's not that big a dog.
Yeah, it's making quite the mess.
Oh yeah, we have eucalyptus trees just to the west of us, so even more so than normal. The leaves are everywhere.
Well, we don't have any on our property, but next to us there are quite a few, and our whole road is covered.
Oh yeah. I'm going to give Ben some credit for having the nerve to sit outside in this wind in front of City Hall. You're really into that position.
Yeah, it's breezy. I had a hard time getting home from work today on my bike.
I could imagine, actually.
Did not want me to come this way.
Wanted you to go some other way, huh?
Yeah, I said, I got to get home for council. So.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Hello, Jordan.
Hello, your assistant city attorney is here filling in tonight. Good to see you all.
Great, good to meet you.
Well, hopefully it'll be a very low-key evening for you, Jordan, and there won't be any excitement.
I'm here either way, so.
Or if you'd prefer excitement, we can stir some up.
Well, I actually have a legal question, and since we're recording, I'll ask it now, related to later in the meeting. When we're required to take a vote that requires 2/3 of the 5 of us, Ben will jump to the answer quicker than me, but it's 3.3333, et cetera. So does that require, do we round up to 4, or since it's under 3.5, is it 3?
It's a 4 vote.
Okay. I'm hoping we won't even have to worry about that, but I actually put it in my notes. I was curious how that would actually work.
Yes, and if there was an absent, if there wasn't a full quorum, then it would need to be a unanimous vote. So
Right, I did see that in the government code, so.
that's right.
Now we need to have a mathematician with us so we can determine what to do, huh, Ben?
Well, I couldn't have answered that question. It's a legal one, not a mathematical one.
Well, if you get us to the 3.3 and Jordan get us to the right answer of rounding up or down, and we're all good.
That's right. That's right.
Team effort.
Usually is.
Now let's see, how are we doing here? Okay, we have Laura, good. So we have everybody we need. So we'll wait just another minute and get started. All right, we are at 6 o'clock. I will ask Mr. Obid if staff is ready to get started.
Thank you, Mayor. We are ready.
All right, well, with that, I'm just going to start the evening by saying a great welcome to everybody on this blustery evening. I'm glad you can make it here, even if it is just virtually, and welcome you to this joint meeting of the Cotati City Council and the successor agency to the former Cotati Community Redevelopment Agency. And this is our regular meeting for Tuesday, April 12th. So now that we've called the meeting to order, I'd like to ask if we could have a roll call, please.
Councilmember Ford.
Here.
Councilmember Sparks.
Here.
Councilmember Moore. Councilmember Moore,
Here.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Here.
Mayor Landman.
Here. And with that, I wonder if now that we've introduced the council to the public, I wonder if the city manager could take a moment and introduce the staff that are here tonight to the public.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So tonight, we obviously have myself, Damian Obid, I'm the city manager. We have Jordan Bishop here, the city attorney. We have Mike Parrish, the police chief, JP Harris, he's a senior planner, community development, Angela Corder, our director of administrative services, Craig Scott, our director of public works and city engineer, and then Kevin Patterson, our deputy city clerk.
All right. Well, thank you for that. So we'll come back now, and I will ask everybody if you would please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, this takes us to item 4, which is approval of minutes and notice of waiving of reading of all resolutions and ordinances introduced and or adopted under this agenda. This is an action item. And I'll begin by asking the council if there's any additions or corrections to the minutes tonight. I'm not seeing any hands going up. Mr. Ford.
Yeah, Mayor Landman, sorry, I was late to find the right button. So just one clarification on the direction for the ag ordinance. I was a little concerned that the direction as written in the minutes was made it sound a little too much like the council had given all of this and agreed upon all of this specific direction. And I wonder if we could just add a phrase that's something like, for example, or including the possibility of, or something like that, because, we're asking for a public hearing. We don't want to prejudge what's going to happen in that public hearing.
Right, indicated general direction, but not a predetermination. I would agree
something like that.
Wholeheartedly. Yeah. Just going to look if I see some nods from the rest of the council here. Yeah, and if we could ask whoever makes the motion.
Well, and now that I look at it again, I was kind of missing one introductory phrase. It does say general concepts for further development and discussion of the public workshop included. And so I think I missed that sentence when I was first reading through it. If we're okay with that capturing what we need, I'm okay with that. My first reading, it sounded like we had said, let's do all of these things, the limited and intensive.
Mr. Ford, nobody in this council has ever missed anything on a first reading, so we're going to hold you responsible for this. That's fine. And I think that if we could ask staff just to add some language as you suggested in addition, if somebody will make that when we ask for a motion for this, if you could make that suggestion, we can have that too, just to have total clarity. I could be fine with that. So if there's no further corrections or additions to this, I'll ask next if we have any public comments on this. Because I see we do have some attendees tonight.
Looking to our attendees tonight, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon, or if you're dialing in, dial *9. John Savage, go ahead.
I'm sorry, that was an error on my part.
Mayor Landman, that will end public comment.
All right, thank you much for that. So I'll bring it back and see if I have a motion to approve these minutes with the one addendum.
So moved with the addendum.
All right, so we have a motion from the Vice Mayor and a second from Councilmember Ford.
And Mayor, sorry, real quick, before you guys vote on that, just to make sure I'm clear on it. So adding "for example" in front of for example.
Could you repeat your original verbiage, Mr. Ford?
Yeah, I think I would propose that just in those 1A and B, or maybe just at the end of the introductory sentence to 1, where it says, look at the potential for 2 categories of urban agriculture, and just add in parentheses something like details for discussion purposes only, or something like that.
Okay, that's clear enough if everyone's okay with that.
I think this makes it pretty clear between the interjectory phrase and that. I think we're in a good place. I'm fine with that too. I'm seeing nods from the council. All right, so if we could have a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Ford,
Yes.
Councilmember Sparks,
Yes.
Councilmember Moore,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yes.
Mayor Landman.
Yes. And this brings us to announcements. And I have a few things to read to everyone tonight, and I'll begin with our meeting orientation for new attendees and viewers. In conformance with the Brown Act and the adopted City Council rules, the meeting agenda includes items labeled as action items, where the City Council will consider the item, and citizens are afforded the opportunity to provide comments relevant to the item being discussed. The meeting agenda also includes a citizen business item, which is the designated place on the agenda where citizens have the right to say whatever they wish. The City Council may or may not choose to respond to comments as the government code allows. However, if the City Council declines to respond, it should not be perceived as giving credence to or agreeing with any statements that the City Council or its members believe are incorrect, misinformed, or purposely biased. Next, Measure S supports police services, a variety of recreation programs for all ages, and the maintenance of our streets, parks, and public buildings. You can see more details on the web at cotaticity.org. Next, citizens interested in receiving City of Cotati community alerts via text or email are encouraged to sign up with Nixle by downloading the Everbridge app from the iOS or Android App Store, or by texting your zip code, 94931, to 888-777. And finally, like always, we do enjoy hearing from you, so please feel free to contact the city at 707-792-4600 or at info@cotaticity.org. If you have a non-emergency issue after normal business hours, you can still contact us at 707-792-4611. And of course, if you have an emergency, please do contact 911. You can continue to look for updates on the city's website and all of our social media channels available on Facebook, Instagram, Nixle, and Nextdoor. So with it, that brings us to item 6, which is approval of the final agenda. This is an action item. And Mr. Obid, I believe we have some changes tonight?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So there was a late add to the packet, and it was posted to the website, the staff report and the resolution. It's basically a resolution to support a grant application for the Highway 116 and West Cotati Avenue intersection safety project. So we're looking to put in a grant application for that project, and the grant requirements just became clear at the very end of last week, and then became partially clear at the end of last week. And it wasn't until Monday, or actually this morning, that I got an email back confirming that we need a resolution of support to apply for the grant, which is due on Friday. So anyway, if it wasn't for the last minute, nothing would ever get done, right? So that's why it wasn't in the packet originally. That's why it was a late add. But as I think the mayor was talking about at the start of the meeting, there was a process to add something. So I'll give it back to you, Mayor.
And so if we were to take this action, then we would not be able to apply for this. So there is a need for immediate action as well.
Yes.
All right. So going back to the council for this requires we need a vote. We need 2/3, in this case, 4 of us, since we've determined that earlier, to vote affirmatively if we're to do this. And we need two findings are required. First, that there's a need to take immediate action. And second, that the need for this action became apparent or came to our attention after the agenda was posted. This is from the government code section 5495.4.2B. So with that, I'll ask if there's any questions from the council for staff. Not seeing any. All right.
Mayor, I will say too, before there's a vote on it, if the council does vote to add it to the agenda, that I would propose it just be added to the end of the regular calendar. So 11 become 11D.
Yeah. That's good, because that where I already had it placed in my notes, and it would drive me crazy to move it around. Thank you, Mr. Obid.
Yeah.
So with that, let's see if we have any public comment in this, since this is an action item, and we actually are making a change tonight.
Thank you, Mayor Landman. Attendees in the audience tonight, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use your raised hand icon, or if you're dialing in, dial *9. Brandon Levine, go ahead.
Unmute. Turn that off now. Good afternoon, or good evening, Mayor and council members. I am actually curious, where is this corridor going in?
All right, when we close public comment, we'll ask staff to respond to this.
Thank you.
Mayor Landman, that will end public comment.
All right, thank you. Mr. Obid, I wonder if you could just give a very brief synopsis of the 116 Gravenstein grant request and the areas where hopefully improvements could be made.
Yeah. So the project location is at West Cotati Avenue, where it comes into Highway 116. Is I think everyone knows it comes in at a really odd angle, and it currently is for people that are on Highway 116 turning on to West Cotati, they have to wait in the travel lane. So the proposed project is basically correcting that intersection angle and signalizing and turn lanes so that people don't have to wait in the travel lane. And also there's a bunch of other bicycle and pedestrian facilities that would go around that to allow more access for bicycles and pedestrians across the highway. That's kind of it in a nutshell.
Perfect. Well, thank you for updating us on that. I'll add one piece of information for the council. It's not part of this vote, but also, and I know this will be very bad news for the council, but there is no closed session tonight. This was just a placeholder, and it turned out there wasn't a need for it. So that's another change, and I thought I'd mention it now ahead of time, just in case anybody was actually perhaps waiting for that. So with that, I would be looking for a motion to allow us to do this.
Move to approve.
A second.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Harvey. And a second from Councilmember Ford. All right. So we have that. Motion is second. If we could have a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Ford,
Yes.
Councilmember Sparks,
Yes.
Councilmember Moore,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yes.
Mayor Landman.
Yes. So that concludes item 6 and brings us to item 7. This is citizen business and public comment for consent calendar items. And once again, I have a little verbiage to read you. Any member of the public wishing to speak to the council on any item or items listed on the consent calendar or any matter or matters not listed on the agenda that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of council may do so at this time. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the council is not allowed to consider issues or take action in any item not listed on the agenda during this period. Pursuant to City Council Policy 2021-01, comments of any member of the public are normally restricted to a total of 3 minutes in length per person for matters not on the agenda, and a total of 3 minutes per person in length for any and all items on the consent calendar. The mayor may extend the time limit for a reasonable time where a disability accommodation has been requested. So with that, I will ask our city clerk if we have any citizen business comments or consent calendar comments tonight.
Thank you, Mayor Landman. To our attendees tonight, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use your raise hand icon. Mayor Landman, that will end public comment.
All right, thank you. So this brings us to the consent calendar. We have 2 items tonight, Council. Item A is a resolution to continue remote meetings, and item B is a livestock care agreement for the Veranda Fletty Ranch. And I'll begin by asking my colleagues if anybody wishes to pull any item tonight. And I'm scanning. I'm not seeing any hands come up. Thank you. And with no hands going forward, I'll ask if I could have a motion from somebody then.
Move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All right, motion from Councilmember Ford and a second by Vice Mayor Harvey. If we could have our roll call vote one more time, please.
Councilmember Ford,
Yes.
Councilmember Sparks,
Yes.
Councilmember Moore,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yes.
Mayor Landman.
Yes. So let's see, this concludes then item 8 and brings us to item 9, which is direction on future agenda items. And I'll ask tonight if any of my colleagues have any future agenda items they wish to propose. And Councilmember Sparks, I see your hand. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Landman. I did speak or emailed back and forth with Damien about this today, just a little bit. As you all know, we've had a longstanding opening on the Marin Sonoma Mosquito and Vector Control Board. And I had asked if we could possibly have maybe a 5-minute presentation about what that board does, just to have an opportunity for a public, get a little more public visibility for that board and perhaps entice somebody to join. I was hearing a radio show today all about in Visalia in the Central Valley, they're going to be releasing millions of genetically modified mosquitoes, and it's a really interesting issue that their vector control board is dealing with, and it just raised the awareness for me, like, boy, we really need to have somebody on that board. So that was my suggestion. Thank you.
And just to confirm, so you talked this over with the city manager, I'm going to assume, and you can fill me in for sure, that this is something that wouldn't be problematic staff time wise. We can go ahead and ask for this. Was that the determination you and the city manager had?
Oh, yes. Sorry. I thought you were asking Damien. Yes, that was the conclusion we reached.
And I'm seeing a smile from the city manager, so I think we're good. So I'm seeing smiles from the rest of the council. I'm seeing no shaking heads or any hands going up. So I will ask staff to bring that back at their convenience then. Thank you. Anybody else? One last time around. Not seeing any hands. All right. That then includes direction on future agenda items. So this brings us to item 10, which is public hearings. And we have one public hearing tonight, 10A, which is a commercial cannabis ordinance amendments and updated commercial cannabis tax resolution. So I'll ask if we could begin tonight with our staff presentation, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So getting before you is an update to the commercial cannabis ordinance. I'll start with sort of the nutshell version, which is basically the ordinance has 2 substantive changes. One is it would remove, if approved, it would remove the use permit requirement for level 2 manufacturing and also by extension micro business. And the second substantive change, which is probably the main substantive change, is allowing on-site consumption through a consumption lounge or cafe. And then separately, that's the ordinance. The other thing that's before you tonight is a resolution just to update the cannabis business taxes. And so there's really no changes there, but I'll talk about that in a minute when I get to that point. But I'll cover the ordinance first. So, back in, going on the Wayback Machine, back in 2007, the city adopted Ordinance 787, which allowed one medicinal cannabis dispensary in Cotati. And that dispensary is Mercy Wellness, as I think everybody knows pretty well. They opened in 2010 as the sole medicinal cannabis dispensary in Cotati. In 2016, the voters approved Prop 64, which legalized adult use cannabis. And just a little interesting factoid that you may or may not know is that Cotatians voted for Prop 64 with a 62% yes vote, which is tied with Sebastopol for the highest yes percentage in Sonoma County for Prop 64. In 2017, the state followed up on Prop 64 with a series of legislative actions to establish a uniform licensing regime for adult use of medicinal cannabis that went into effect January 1, 2018. In November 2017, Measure G, not to be confused with sales tax Measure G, this is cannabis business tax Measure G, was approved by Cotati voters with a 79% yes vote. In 2018, the city adopted Ordinance 883, which created the current commercial cannabis ordinance that we use today. It's located under Title 17 of our municipal code. So Ordinance 883 is what we're talking about amending today. Prior to bringing the draft ordinance to the Planning Commission and then, of course, to the council now, staff circulated the draft ordinance to all of our active permitted cannabis businesses to get their input. And Mercy was one of the businesses that provided input. It was attached to the staff report. There was a couple other businesses that provided input, but mostly about the other two businesses were about the tax resolution. That was Cali Drops and I'm probably get this acronym wrong, but FGH, I think, or FHG. Anyway, they're a distribution business here in Cotati. That's also attached to the staff report. So today, most of the available permits have been issued and are in some phase of completion, but only 3 businesses are currently fully in operation. We have a micro business, a non-storefront retail, level 1 manufacturing and distribution, actually, so technically 4, I guess. The proposed ordinance revisions before you today are, as I talked about at the top of this, has two primary changes, but there's also various non-substantive code cleanup changes. And then, of course, the main ones are removing the level 2, removing the use permit requirement from level 2, manufacturing and micro business, and allowing for on-site consumption at a lounge or cafe. And that would be associated with a city permitted retailer or micro business with a retail use with city council approval. So that would, as you probably saw in the ordinance, the way that would be effectuated is that a business with one of those city issued permits would have to amend it, and that amendment would have to come to the city council for approval. So they would submit an application to the city, the staff would review it, and then ultimately the council would review it to approve that kind of use. It does expand hours for the storefront retailers, and it amends the smoking ordinance to allow smoking or vaping in the cannabis consumption lounge with specified conditions and controls. And just to dig a little deeper into the 2 primary changes with the use permit removal, we now, since we originally adopted this ordinance back in 2018, we have quite a bit more experience now processing the applications, and staff have found that in the commercial cannabis permitting process, we're already asking for the applicants for all the materials that we would also ask for in a use permit. So we find ourselves essentially taking them through the process to get the cannabis permit, and then we basically ask them for the same materials again, and then take them to the Planning Commission for a use permit. So it just appeared to us to be unnecessary in terms of cost and time for everyone involved, and it also could create a potential conflict if, for example, the council were to issue the cannabis permit, but then the Planning Commission were to deny the use permit. That would be awkward. So it'd be better just to consolidate that all with the council through the cannabis permit process. And then with the accessory use for lounge, currently some of the other cities that allow this are Santa Rosa, San Francisco, West Hollywood, Imperial City, Palm Springs, Coalinga, and that's not an exhaustive list, but those are the ones, at least that I'm aware of, that allow on-site consumption in a lounge type environment. And Currently, they're limited by state law to be within the state licensed premises of the retailer. So you'll notice in the ordinance, it says it has to be in the same legal parcel. We put that in our ordinance, but state law requires it to be in the premises, which is essentially the licensed area of the retail business. That may or may not ever change at the state level, but at least locally, it would still, at least for our code as proposed, it would be required to still be in the same parcel. To enter a on-site consumption lounge, you have to be 21 years of age or older. So with medicinal, I mean, you can't have younger, I believe it's 18 to 21 would allow medicinal, but medicinal is not allowed in lounges. So it's only 21 and over for lounges, even though you could go into a medicinal retailer at 18 for, medicine, but the lounges would be strictly 21 and over. Currently, the state does not allow food service in lounges, although it's proposed to change, potentially change through a couple different mechanisms. One is the Bureau of Cannabis Control is updating their regulations, and that's currently pending, which would allow the sale of prepackaged non-cannabis foods and non-alcoholic beverages. Separately, there's also a bill that's in the state legislature, AB 1034, which seems to also allow for the preparation of non-cannabis food. And so the ordinance is written to allow non-cannabis food and beverage if and when it becomes allowable at the state. And the one thing I will say is if someone has already been licensed through the city council for the cannabis consumption lounge, you'll notice that the allowance for service of food is at the city manager level. So if they already have a city council approved on-site consumption lounge and they want to add prepackaged food service or maybe prepared food service at some point, then the city manager has the authority to do that. Of course, there's a bunch of other permits they'd have to get through the health department and things like that. So there's other processes that they would go through for that type of thing. Currently, delivered food is the only food service option. So, that's a sort of a pending change. It's a potential future change, but the ordinance is written anticipating that may happen at some point in the not too distant future. And the proposed ordinance does not put an explicit limit on the size of the consumption lounges, but of course, it has to be approved by city council through the amended cannabis permit. So that's going to be sort of a case-by-case review by the council. The changes also propose a change in operating hours for storefront retail. So that's storefront retail or the micro business, one of those two businesses. And given the controls that are in place, the operational controls and just the positive operational experience to date, at least at a staff level, we supported the change. And the operating hours are proposed to align with state law, which is 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. And this would also affect the associated consumption lounges if the council were to adopt that change. And so smoking, this was probably the thing that staff spent the most time looking into because it was probably the topic that had the most moving parts just to review. And smoking or vaping. So just in speaking with Mercy Wellness, who has, by the way, been a great partner through this process in terms of answering questions or pointing us to resources so that we could, find the state resources, other examples. So in talking with them, it appeared that, one of the primary on-site consumption routes or methods that they would be pursuing and around the state, this seemed to be fairly consistent too, where smoking or vaping seems to be the primary thing that lounges, at least so far, are using for on-site consumption. And, I think that, that is something that's the easiest to monitor, certainly in terms of effect, because the effects are much more immediate than if you do on-site, like edibles or things like that. Edibles are a more complicated thing to monitor and manage as a lounge. So smoking and vaping from a public safety perspective seems like, certainly something that we would not want to exclude. So the smoking ordinance had an exemption built into it to allow smoking or vaping in a city permitted cannabis consumption lounge with all the appropriate controls. There's no secondhand smoke that is detectable by neighbors or can't be seen by underage youth, that sort of thing. So, and the last thing I'll just say is, with in either case, whether it's an edible or smoking, another important piece that was incorporated into the ordinance in sort of broad terms was making sure that the business can effectively monitor how customers use the cannabis and ensuring that they have a safe ride home if they do exceed too much. So kind of like, if you can think of like in the alcohol world, this is old news, right? They have ABC has a responsible beverage service program, and it's really not that much different. In this case, just has to be adapted for cannabis. So the ordinance was written to allow creative solutions, but while ensuring that we try to protect public safety with some of the main things that we want to see in the amended permit applications, and so that we can review all that, come to an agreement on what we think makes the most sense and is most protective of public safety, and then also have the council review in a public meeting. So that was the general philosophy behind how the ordinance was put together. And you'll also notice in the packet, actually, most of the packet today are letters of support for this concept that Mercy Wellness had worked on putting together. So I'm sure you all read many of those. And real quick, I can just sum up the resolution. Just to conclude this, is the resolution. When we passed the original tax resolution, it was for a minimum of 3 years, and it's a bit stale now. That was in 2018. So the resolution in the packet is essentially the same as the resolution that was adopted in 2018. The only change to it is that if business is distribution only, then they'd be subject to a 2% tax rate. If they have distribution as a part of their business, like, and that's most of our businesses, where they'll have manufacturing and distribution, or they'll have, micro business and distribution, or they'll have, cultivation and distribution. So there's lots of, that seems to be the primary model. But they would still be a 0% tax rate. It would only be for a business that's purely 100% distribution. And the reason is because we didn't want to just have a 0% tax rate for a category of business, just to attract businesses to do that sole activity to our city, just to avoid contributing. So that was the reason for the change. And the change is, you'll probably note in the resolution, the change was written to go into effect on July 1. And rather than immediately upon adoption, because the thinking is July 1 coincides with the start of a quarter, and it also gives some time between now and then to just make sure everything gets, for the one business that this would apply to, they can ask questions and we can work through any sort of, accounting processes or anything like that they want to talk about before then. So it gives some time before it becomes goes immediately into effect. And with that, I think I do want to point out, that's the big picture. I do want to point out a couple things that were brought to my attention, just some typos that are in the packet. And I'll just give you some page numbers and tell you what they were. So we have on packet page 541, there was a question about what S means. It's specific use regulations. It is the land use table. And including a footnote that S means specific use regulation, just so people are not unclear on what S means in the land use table. On packet page 545, under paragraph A, there's something happened with Word and it hiccuped and it produced the same line 3 times. So that's just I'll just correct that in the final version. On packet page 557, there is, again, there was a little hiccup there under item 3 where it just, the same sentence got replicated 3 times for some reason. That's just a word hiccup that I'll clean up for final adoption. The sentence above that says additional cannabis retail dispensaries, and the cannabis is a lowercase c. That's just a small correction, I'll do uppercase c there. On the prior page on 556, under C2, applicability, just making the terminology consistent rather than cannabis storefront retailer. It would say just storefront commercial cannabis retailer. And the last one is on packet page 563, under item 4. Just to be broader with the term, basically the paragraph starts, if permitted under state law and approved under it says city retail dispensary permit. Just change city retail dispensary to commercial cannabis permit. There's not actually a city retail dispensary permit per se. It's a commercial cannabis permit, but it's for a retail dispensary. Anyway, it's a small thing, but it broadens it and clarifies that we're talking about a commercial cannabis permit. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, we'll see if we have any hands come up. Let's see, I see Mr. Ford, Mr. Sparks, and Vice Mayor Harvey. In that order.
Or Ms. Sparks, we'll go with. So 2 questions. First one is, I just want to clarify, so amendment to the commercial cannabis permit is reviewed by staff and comes directly to City Council, doesn't require a stop at Planning Commission, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thanks. And the second was on the monitoring plan that the lounge operator has to produce. That's evaluated by staff and then City Council as part of the commercial cannabis permit. That's not like BCC doesn't have a role in evaluating those like ABC does for alcohol.
I'm not fully sure. I'm not an expert on what BCC requires to be submitted for the permitting process. Our part of it typically is, we do the permitting, and then the state will basically reach out to us when they receive an application and say, did this business get approved for this type of business activity? And we would just confirm it, and then they could issue a state permit. So I'm not.
Yeah. I'm just trying to raise the issue of both expertise and authority for actually evaluating those plans for, monitoring patrons' consumption to ensure they're not risks when they leave the premises. And I understand the distinction of we approve the business use and ABC approves the plan for managing alcohol. I'm less clear on where that line is with cannabis. And it sounds like it's not clear.
For monitoring customers that might come into a use lounge, and I'm sure Brandon can talk more about this because it's going to be something that we're going to have to develop, together. But there are some other examples out there, other lounges and other jurisdictions that have done this.
Yeah, my point was, I was just hoping that some state authority was already taking that on, and we didn't have to develop our own rules for monitoring patrons. Like ABC handles it for alcohol, we don't directly.
Right.
Anyway, thanks.
Got it.
Councilmember Sparks.
Thank you. I just have three questions. The first one was about, and I do apologize, I wasn't able to ask these earlier. Sorry for the last minute questions. But first one was about the timing of changing the distribution tax rate to 2%. I'm just curious, when was the first notification that the businesses received that this might be on the table? And I saw in the staff report, it said, that staff believed that next year was too long to delay the change, and I just wondered what were the factors behind that assertion, just to understand that a little better. So that's first question. Second question, on packet page 545 and 550, there's a word "any" in front of felony that's been added, and I was curious whether that is to bring us in line with existing state regulations, or whether we're going sort of above and beyond and being stricter than the state requirements. And then the last question was on packet page 564, there is, I'm trying to find it here, on item 10, it talks about that the space occupied by a consumption cafe or lounge shall be definite and distinct from the space where other licensed activities are exercised. Would that preclude a lounge from being offered sort of in a cultivation area? Those are my three questions.
Yeah, so in terms of the, I'm trying to find the section. I'm sorry, it was on packet page 564. Number 10, is that the one you were referring to?
Yes, number 10 on page 564.
Yeah, so that, we were trying to conform with the state regulations as we knew them right now. And, but to answer your question about what could it be in a cultivation area? I think it needs to be somewhere different. I mean, that's how you see the lounges now too. And that seems to be consistent with where the state regulations are. Like there's a retail area and then there's a lounge somewhere else typically in the same building is what I've seen, but accessed separately. So that was, I think that was the only intent there, was just to make it consistent with,
So state law, the state rules do prohibit a lounge from being located in the cultivation area?
That's my recollection. It's been a while since I looked at the state rules, but that was my recollection. There's the state rules that set that. On the felony convictions, that was just a clarification. We already had specified the penal code section, so it's just being clear that these penal code sections lay out what felonies are, and it was already applicable. It was just a clarification. It didn't change. It wasn't intended to change anything.
So the penal code already, is there a state rule that precludes someone who had a felony 30 years ago from having a commercial cannabis license now? Is it the case that any felony at any point in your past disqualifies you?
I don't believe you can operate a commercial cannabis business with a felony. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And regarding your first question on the tax rate, so I was looking actually for the letter that we got back that was attached to the packet, and it was in, I think, early February when we notified them we gave them the draft resolution, and that's what they commented on. And they had the one business that responded to that would be affected by it asked for either us not to do it or to wait until next year. And I don't know, at least from staff's perspective, it didn't seem to be any reason to wait a whole year. It just, they've had the benefit of operating that way since they started, and it just seemed to be, it didn't seem to be right to institute it immediately, because that, that could be kind of chaotic for them. And, I get giving them several months to just get in line with things, but that was the rationale, is there's no reason to allow them to continue to operate like this for indefinite amount of time, because I would suspect that they would just continue to want to push it out. And that seems, where they would go with it.
Right, thank you.
All right, thank you. Vice Mayor Harvey?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to thank Damien for spending time with me, and I had a lot of comments and corrections, which I see he's captured, and I just wanted to thank him for that, because I thought maybe the mayor might get a little upset with me bringing all those up at the meeting. So thank you for meeting with me, Damien, and catching all those and making those changes. That's all.
Actually, Madam Vice Mayor, you'll just have the mayor on record saying, I appreciate having your eagle eye for all these years, looking over these things and helping us bring forward a better product. That's a good result, and it wouldn't happen as often without you. So, Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Landman. A lot of the questions were already answered, but I do have a question. We potentially have another, we've authorized another dispensary to open up under the 2 licenses we now have. Would this allow that other dispensary to open up a lounge with just ministerial type approval, or would it have to come before the council?
They'd have to come before the council. Yeah.
Okay. That was the only question I had at this point. Thank you.
All right, and let's see. I do have one quick question for you, Mr. Obid. Just going back to the subject of when we had our first notification for our distribution-only businesses in town, if you just came to this looking at this initial packet and reading this, it does seem like a short notification. But I wondered if you could confirm my recollection. Having been involved about roughly 3-4 years ago when we first did this, I seem to remember there was a lot of public discussion, and it was agreed that as a council and as a city, our rates, all of these rates and taxes, were started purposely low, which was unlike what was the prevailing action in most locations at the time, to help these businesses get started. But there was it was expected that there would be increases in the future. And as a matter of fact, I think there was a pretty clear expectation there could likely be increases down the road. Does that seem to ring a bell to you?
Yeah, I mean, that was the general thought, is that we, when we did the original resolution, is that in the future, it could be increased. Yeah, for sure. And I will say, one thing that would probably also be helpful that I neglected to mention earlier is that the change in the tax resolution with regard to distribution was also intended to align with sort of land use policy that we have for cannabis, where we have 7 licenses available. And if you are, like, let's say you're cultivation and you want to do distribution also, that distribution is considered an ancillary use and it doesn't count towards your 7. But if you want to be distribution only, a standalone distribution, you count as one of the licenses, one of the 7 licenses. And so the change in the tax resolution was also intended to sort of align with that land use philosophy too. So if you're going to be a standalone distribution business, then you get also a business tax too, but if you're going to be ancillary, then you don't.
I do remember initially I kind of was somewhat quizzical why in this one particular case there was nothing, no tax whatsoever, even though it could take up one of our 7 slots. But having said that, I do think it was a good idea that staff and the council followed of starting slow with what we permitted, and also very low in terms of taxation to try and give these businesses a chance to get on their feet. Because as we've seen these last few years, it's been even more problematic than expected. So I think that was a good direction. So I'll look one more time, see if we have any final questions before I open the public hearing. I'm just going to see. Councilmember Ford, I do see your hand up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, Councilmember Sparks' question raised an issue for me. So those 2 penal codes that are cited on page 545 actually are a list of specific felonies. One of them is violent felonies, and the other is a list of felonies that constitute strikes. in the three strikes laws. So it's not all felonies, it's a specific list of felonies. And so I guess this might be a question for our city attorney to interpret that word any here. I'm concerned that adding the word any actually makes it more confusing now, whether it reads now as any felony, but what's intended is any felony from these lists. And so I guess we don't actually need to fix this here, but before it comes back for final, I'd like that worked out to make sure we're not actually trying to make this more restrictive kind of on the sly.
That might be a good idea to give our staff, our legal staff, a chance to research this and clarify the wording. And we could ask staff to make sure that's rounded up before we come back with that. Thank you. All right, so we have no further questions then. It is time to open the public hearing. And I'll ask your Deputy City Clerk if we have any public comments tonight.
Thank you, Mayor Landman. Attendees in the audience, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use your raise hand icon. Joe Sullivan, go ahead.
Good evening, council members. Thank you for hearing my comments tonight. My name is Joe Sullivan. I'm the Director of Procurement for Mercy Wellness. I've had the privilege of purchasing the products we sell for our community for the last 7 years. And I'd like to speak to two things important to me in regards to the consumption lounge. And I think Councilmember Ford spoke about it earlier, but what I'd like to speak about is just the education and efficacy of having a lounge. With a lounge, we could further educate our consumers to make a smarter decision, which would hopefully lead to them not being as impaired and also making smarter decisions when it comes to leaving our area. And then also too, with the pricing that we are dealing with as far as taxes are concerned, being the purchasing manager, I know firsthand exactly how our consumers are suffering from that. And so being able to make a more informed decision when it comes to what they're purchasing while also being educated when they leave, I think would lead to a much better result for us. And I'd just like to say thank you for hearing my comments.
Thank you.
Craig Litwin, go ahead.
Hello, Mayor and council members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Craig Litwin, and I've been working in the medical cannabis, hemp, and recreational cannabis field for quite some time. Actually, as a 19-year-old, I was the top signature gatherer for Prop 215 here in Sonoma County, one of the top two, and was a former mayor of Sebastopol, where I co-authored our dispensary ordinance back in the day when it was all medical. I served there from 2000 to 2008. And actually, as an aside, got to serve on that mosquito district you were talking about earlier, so I've got plenty of stories there. In my other hat, I'm CEO of 421 Group. We're a cannabis consultancy, and I'm here today to urge you to approve the ordinance. I think this is very historic. It's a natural next step of your regulated commercial cannabis allowances. You've really been a leader. Sebastopol, we've led the way, and I've watched you lead the way as well in Cotati. I mean, you were the first ones to allow for adult use sales in Sonoma County. And Mercy Wellness was the first to be allowed to do that. And they've rolled it out wonderfully, just exemplary. Nothing but the best when you look at them as an operator. I've worked with them for a very long time. And I can tell you that they're honest, hardworking, they're earnest cannabis business pioneers. I watched Brandon, the CEO, and Felicia there spearhead 3 different major donation projects, just ones I've observed. One's for Daily Acts and the work that they've done in your city and around the area. 2's for eliminating pesticide use in schools. I got to watch them donate a hefty contribution towards that countywide effort. And then the 3rd one was the Palms Inn in southern Santa Rosa to help with transitional housing from folks, getting them off the street, the people who are most prone to suffer from homelessness. So, this is really more than just about an ordinance update. This is about, moving commercial cannabis forward in a normalized way. You're in great hands with Mercy Wellness as far as having an operator who will exemplify the precise reasons why we're creating these regulations in the first place, how they can be done in a way that's a model, really, for everybody. So thank you again for your time, and I yield the rest.
Thank you.
Felicia Acamazo, go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council. My name is Felicia Acamazo, and I'm the Operations Director at Mercy Wellness. Mercy's #1 priority for the on-site consumption lounge is safety. No matter what, we will remain diligent in the conduct and state of our customers. We realize this requires hypervigilance, and we are prepared to adopt policies mirroring the beer, wine, and alcohol industries. We are developing an extensive responsible consumption service program similar to ABC's responsible beverage service. We will require our on-site consumption lounge employees to go through this rigorous training. Mercy's responsible consumption service program will be more comprehensive than the existing cannabis consumption laws by design. It's our responsibility as one of the first consumption lounges in the state to go above and beyond what is needed to create a safe space to consume recreational and medicinal cannabis. These protocols will prevent over-serving to any of our patrons and exclude sales to minors under the age of 21. Mercy employees will diligently educate customers in an effort to ensure responsible consumption. We will have a membership agreement that every patron must sign, and if broken, we have the right to revoke their membership. Driving impaired or under the influence is against the law in California, period. Employees at our facility will be trained extensively on methods of recognizing impairment. Mercy's responsible consumption service policy will also allow us to stop serving a person for any reason we deem necessary. We will also slow consumption service if needed and offer water or non-alcoholic beverage or food to help those who may be impaired. We want to make it easy for customers to make the right choices. Ride-sharing services will be made available to those that need it. Mercy will also incentivize those who designate a driver or use a rideshare company such as Uber or Lyft to our facility. Mercy will be transparent about our measures to keep our customers and the community safe. Our team will continue to share information and to keep the communication lines open to the city, officials, law enforcement, and the public. While access to adult cannabis has increased since legalization in 2016, many have been left without a place to safely consume cannabis. We've heard from many of them through their letters of support that you've received prior to this meeting. Either they have children at home or live in an apartment where they aren't allowed to consume. Sometimes they may result in consumption in public places or while in their vehicles driving around town. Mercy Wellness hopes to provide this space for education and responsible, accessible consumption. Thank you for your time and consideration for this next evolution of our local and legal cannabis industry.
Brandon Levine, go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Thank you for taking the time to further your already successful cannabis ordinance. And I want to thank those of you that reached out and toured Mercy and receptive of the information, and we're able to take a look at what our plans are for the future. Some of you may already know me. My name is Brandon Levine. I am the founder and CEO of Mercy Wellness and multiple other cannabis businesses. We first opened Mercy Wellness in June of 2010 in Cotati. Over the past 12 years, we have learned a whole lot and grown to employ close to 100 people. We have a great partnership with the city of Cotati, and we look forward to more growth here. If you're concerned about the hurdles that come along with this use, you might want to consider running a pilot program for on-site consumption. Given how long we have been in business in Cotati and our extensive experience, I believe we are the perfect candidate for piloting such a cannabis consumption lounge. It is in everybody's best interest to be a good operator while considering on-site consumption. We are in full support of whatever the decision that you make for Cotati, and we will continue to be an asset and contributor to the city. Thank you for your time. I am available for any questions and even tours for those that may have not had a chance to come by. If you want to reach out, I will share my email and personal cell phone number. Thank you.
Andrew Longman, go ahead. Andrew, are you able to unmute?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Loud and clear.
Awesome, thank you so much. Hello, City Council members, Mayor and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Andrew Longman. and I'm the Client Services Manager for 421 Group, a local cannabis consultancy based here in Sonoma County. I'm here today to speak in support of the proposed ordinance as both a professional in the cannabis community, but also as a cannabis patient. First off, I'd like to commend city staff on their efforts toward delivering such a well thought out and comprehensive ordinance. I would also like to convey a sense of trust that I feel, knowing that Mercy Wellness can be the first business to spearhead on-site consumption in the city of Cotati. Mercy is well known in the cannabis community as having a patient and patron first mindset, focused on educating their customer base and giving back to their community. Their commitment toward compliance and their track record in the city is unmatched, which is why I believe they are the perfect business to roll out a new program like on-site consumption. It is important to pass this ordinance because many local residents do not live in places where it is safe to consume cannabis. The community needs safe places to consume medicine or recreate and learn about cannabis products that can be beneficial for them. Cannabis is often enjoyed in a group setting, and a structured, safe, and regulated environment is such a place. Many other jurisdictions allow for on-site consumption. Adding Cotati to this growing list is sensible and forward-thinking, just like when you approved adult use sales. I believe that this ordinance is a winner and that having a great team like Mercy Wellness as the first to implement the program is a recipe for success. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Mayor Landman, that will end public comment.
Thank you. So with that, we'll close the public hearing and bring it back to council for discussion. And first, I'll ask if anybody in the council has any questions specifically they'd like to ask Mr. Levine, since he's offered graciously. So I'll wait a minute and see if any hands go up for that. And if not, then I'm open to anybody who would like to lead the discussion. And if there's no discussion, I'm open to motions. Vice Mayor Harvey.
I guess I'll start. So full disclosure, I actually went in and had a tour of Mercy. It's been quite a while since I've been there since the very beginning. As usual, from what we know with Mercy, they have really continued to set the bar extremely high. They are always forward looking and wanting to be above and beyond what normally might be considered for various things. So I was extremely impressed with what I had seen and how they have grown and the different things that they put into place over the last decade that they have been with us in town. So I agree with one of the commenters that said that, they are a perfect group to pilot this effort because they continually go above and beyond and show us, what the best solutions are for these. So I look, if this passes, I look forward to seeing what their plans are because they are always extremely creative in how they address various things. I was also extremely impressed with the letters that we got. So yes, there were quite a lot of them, but what I found extremely valuable was a lot of the comments. So it wasn't just that they were support, but a lot of the comments rang true with things like, we have a lot of folks that live in living units that they can't for various reasons, be it other family members with secondhand smoke or multifamily units or things like that. And so they need a safe place, and this will allow for that. The other thing that kept ringing true in a lot of the emails was the fact that it allows a safe place for people to pick and choose what strains or levels and things like that they might want to use in a safe place to be able to be monitored and see what works for them and what doesn't work for them. And from all the comments that I've heard from folks, Mercy really has a real high level of making sure that it's the right product for the person. And I think that this concept of the lounge will allow for that further education and further safety of their clients. So I really appreciated all of the letters that we received, in particular with the comments. So we will see where this goes, but I appreciate all the work that staff did getting us here. I agree with some of the commenters that we are really at a place where we need to move to the next level, and this does seem like a natural place for us to move to. So with that, I will let others comment. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. So next I have Councilmember Moore, followed by Councilmember Ford, and then Councilmember Sparks.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I would kind of concur with Vice Mayor Harvey. The track record of Mercy has been great. We haven't had any issues. In transparency, for complete transparency, I also did do a tour of Mercy just last week. And again, just a phenomenal operation there. I don't know that it would be necessary to do it on a pilot basis, because if I understand this correctly, if there were to be a nuisance issue, both the city manager and or the chief could recommend that that be looked into. If that's correct, Mr. Obid?
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, Councilmember Moore. So if there's any sort of nuisance issues, obviously we work with the businesses first to try to solve it. But, and ultimately it could, if some business were truly out of bounds and not addressing it, then it could go as far as even ultimately revoking the cannabis permit. Yeah.
Okay. So we have the mechanisms in place should that be necessary. I can't imagine we would see that, but you never know. Okay, and then secondly, and this is something that maybe we can come back to, I do have a concern with the removing the use permit for the level 2 volatile manufacturing, even though the current thought on that is that it's redundant with the application process to begin with.
So the thought is it's both redundant, but also it also would create an awkward situation if the council were to approve the cannabis permit and the planning commission were to deny the use permit. So the other thought was that it would consolidate it all at one decision body, so that they're making both decisions essentially. So you can't have a conflict between two different decision bodies.
Thank you.
All right, let's see. Next, I believe we have Mr. Ford.
Thank you, Mayor Landman. In full disclosure, I was not able to go on a tour of Mercy Wellness, but I have no concerns with the ordinance. I agree with everybody, with the previous speakers, that it's time for us to make this step. The one thing I'm a little nervous about, as I expressed in a question earlier, is I'm nervous about the city being in the business of policing responsible consumption plans. It's an area of expertise that is better suited to somebody who's doing this for a lot of places. And so I hope that the state, and maybe we can somehow express that opinion to the state, that the BCC or whatever they're called step up their game and figure out this sort of work. I'm up for it, given that we're just talking about at most 2, but I do want to point out that the ordinance would not just apply to Mercy, and some of the discussions that we're having around Mercy being an excellent partner and business in town are perhaps more appropriate for the actual commercial cannabis permit amendment when they apply for that after we pass the ordinance. So I'll save my positive comments about Mercy until we get there. I don't have any concerns for it, but I do think the ordinance should be available to the other and in the future additional operators of retail cannabis who might also want to open on-site consumption places. On the use permit issue for level 2 manufacturing, I'm in favor of the proposed change. Partly, another piece of that Mr. Obid didn't mention just now is that the fact that use permits run with the property. And so we'd get into this awkward situation where a property perhaps has a use permit for level 2 volatiles manufacturing, but no longer has a cannabis permit. It's just kind of this weird mismatch of permits. So I prefer to consolidate them into one permit application evaluated by the city council. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Let's see. And Councilmember Sparks.
Thank you very much. I also accepted an invitation to go on a tour of Mercy Wellness, and I was extremely impressed with their operation. I am very supportive of this ordinance. I think it's a great step forward for Cotati, and I'm glad to be to see us moving this direction. I was impressed reading through all the letters. I actually counted that there were 25 letters in support from Cotati residents, and that was even though 25 is a lot, that was a small percentage of the total letters we received. But it was so just interesting to see all the different places that people were coming from to Mercy, and just how many folks Mercy is bringing into town, which I think is great. So I'm very supportive. I do have a question. I'm willing to go along with enacting the 2% distribution tax rate this year. I just wonder if it feels a little unfair to me to start it in July, which is by the time we move, if we were to approve this ordinance very quickly, that would only be maybe about 2 months out from when the ordinance was approved. And it just seems really sudden to make a change to somebody. So I would prefer to probably wait a few more months to implement it, just to give them time to adjust. But other than that, I'm very supportive of everything in here.
Thank you. Yeah, I have to say, I think the Vice Mayor's comments, I'm going to paraphrase, but I think she described Mercy Wellness as a business, being generally forward-looking in our experience and essentially consistently exceeding expectations. And that's certainly the experience I've had. So I think there's some definite value. Obviously, this will be available to anybody who's a legal permittee in this community to be able to do this, to have a cannabis consumption cafe, lounge, whatever it's going to be called. But I think having a business like this help us set high initial standards. That worked out nicely. I think seriously, that's a good thing. So I think there's some definite value in that. I agree with my colleagues. I have no concerns or any worries about tonight's ordinance, introducing it. All we're doing tonight is opening the door to considering these individually, with each time coming through the council for a final determination, which I think is very valuable. We're not dealing with specifics, fortunately, tonight. And that's one reason that I didn't choose to take a tour this time. I've been over to Mercy Wellness numerous times. I think I'll be a lot more interested in talking to them as we begin to develop the specifics of particularly how the safety aspects of their on-site consumption plan can work. Because I think that will be something that the council will be very interested in. And I know it'll be very important to me. So with that, I agree with my colleagues. I fully support this. And with that, I'll ask one more time if there's any further comments from any of my colleagues. And I'm not seeing any hands up. So at that point, then I would be open to a motion if anybody would like to make.
All right, Mr. Mayor, I would move that we introduce an ordinance to amend the Commercial Cannabis Municipal Code, including allowing retailers to have commercial cannabis cafe lounges under the specified conditions, streamlining permitting of level 2 manufacturing and other general code cleanup, and adopt a resolution updating the cannabis business tax resolution.
I'll second that.
We have a motion from the Vice Mayor, and we have a second from our outgoing Mayor, Councilmember Moore. I will ask for a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Ford.
Yes.
Councilmember Sparks.
Yes.
Councilmember Moore.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harvey.
Yes.
Mayor Landman.
Yes. All right, thank you. So that concludes our public hearing for tonight. And this brings us to item 11 on our our calendar, and that's our regular agenda. We have 3 items tonight, and we'll begin with our first one, which is, as soon as I can get to it here, the appointment of a new planning commissioner. So I'll begin by asking for a staff report, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So before you tonight is a discussion and hopefully ratification of a planning commissioner for Councilmember Sparks. The packet has the redacted applications of the various applicants, including John T. Savage, David Wasson, Kay Rivers, and Kimberly Moffett. And as is defined in our Muni Code, the responsible city council member, in this case, Councilmember Sparks, would review the applications received for her nomination and nominate a potential planning commissioner that would then be ratified by the full council. And the nominee for planning commissioner from Councilmember Sparks is John T. Savage. And with that, I'd be happy to turn it back to you, Mayor, to finish the conversation.
Thank you. Well, normally this is the point that I would open it to questions, but what I'd like to do tonight with the council's agreement is allow Councilmember Sparks, since she's the nominating council member, to introduce her nominee, and then perhaps we can ask Mr. Savage to speak to us. And after that, then we can open to council questions. Perhaps if they have questions for Mr. Savage, they can do that at that time too. If that's agreeable with my colleagues, I'd like to give the floor to Councilmember Sparks.
Thank you very much, Mayor Landman. So as I was reviewing the applications, I was just blown away by what wonderful candidates we had this time. And I just want to thank everyone who applied, because, you know, we always say everyone was a great candidate, but this time it's really true. There were such good, strong candidates, and I'm hoping that the folks who applied and were not selected will stay involved and get involved in city leadership in the future. So thank you to everyone who applied. Ultimately, I've chosen to nominate John Savage because I'll talk a little bit about what I know about him. If you look on his application, there's one small line that says Chicago Architectural Foundation docent training. But in speaking with him, I learned that what that really stands for is about an 8-week college level program in the history of architecture. And he furthermore gave over 70 tours as a docent, 2-hour tours informing people about modern architecture, historic architecture, and understanding the way that urban planning and city design affects the lives of people who live in that city. So I was really impressed with that and his affinity for city planning. I also, one thing that really pushed me towards nominating John Savage is that I think it's really important for us to have some leadership from people who have chosen to live somewhere where they share a wall with a neighbor. We have a lot of higher density housing within the city, and I thought it was important to get that perspective on the board. So not only does John live in the Santero Way area, but he also serves on the homeowners association there, and I believe that that's going to be a really valuable knowledge and experience in understanding what works in higher density housing near transit, and a really great perspective that he's going to bring to the board. So I'm very excited to have him joining us, and I just think he's going to be a real asset for the city, and I'm so happy that he applied.
Well, thank you. I wonder if the perfect time to ask if we could give the floor then to Mr. Savage, if he'd like to introduce himself, perhaps make any comments to the council and to the public.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you great.
All right, great. Thank you. It's nice to meet everyone this evening. Just a little bit about my time in Cotati. We initially bought our townhouse here in 2005 as a weekend place. We've recently found that retirement was an option with the pandemic coming on. So we sold our house in Oakland and have moved up to Cotati full-time since the summer of 2020. So while we haven't been full-time residents for long, We've been coming up here and enjoying our time in Cotati. We really love this city and this community. You can tell that the city is very well planned and very thoughtfully put together. The size of the community and the amenities and the history and the charm are just, things that we love about this area. I grew up on a farm in Indiana, and the bucolic and agricultural aspects of the area up here is something I find attractive. In Sonoma County, they seem to be making agriculture sexy and romantic, but in Indiana, it's not like that at all. But I do like what they do with it up here. As far as joining the Planning Commission, I do have an affinity for city and urban planning. I'm kind of a curious person. Anytime I see a shovel in the ground or earth moving equipment somewhere, I kind of start researching to see what's going on. And I think that, the city here has a lot of experienced people, a lot of wealth of information on the planning committee. And I know that I'll have a steep learning curve to get up to speed, but I definitely want to be the sponge and hop in and become a contributor to the community. So that's all I really have to say. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Savage. So let's see, I will bring it back. And I believe then this might be, unless anybody in the council have any questions for Mr. Savage that they'd like to ask before we go to public comment. I've seen the vice mayor's hand go up.
I don't have a question, but I would like to repeat what Laura said. We really got great candidates. It must have been really hard for her to pick. But having been on at least one meeting with Mr. Savage, I was really impressed with the amount of information that he knew about Cotati and his interest in Cotati just from the one meeting that I was in with him. So I think that was really important to get his perspective on being someone who comes from another area and, how he viewed Cotati. And he definitely asked really great questions in the meeting. So that is what I know. And I appreciate all of the applicants. Again, there was a lot of qualification there. And I think that says a lot about people wanting to get involved these days. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. All right, let's see. I see Councilmember Moore, you had a question?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Landman. I want to thank all the candidates for applying. I think it's great that we had such wonderful candidates. I do have a question for Mr. Savage, and I'm going to put you on the spot here, Mr. Savage. And my question to you is, what might you consider to be your biggest concern or reservation about being on Planning Commission?
I think that getting up to speed, I know there's a lot of things in process, programs in process. Laura has shared with me some information on the land use training that you guys went through. In some of my digging around, I found out the Association, I think, of Cities and Counties has some training opportunities, seminars and things. And they're not things I think that are readily available, but come up periodically. So I think, becoming an expert at this will take some time. I think there's, sort of a few core issues before cities in California right now. One being housing, one being the ecology, the water and those type of things, and then also just the fiduciary responsibility that the leaders of a community have to make sure that the city is financially sound and is prepared for the future. So when Laura and I were talking, I thought it was interesting. We're all going to be gone in 50 years, 75 years, depending on your age. And what is Cotati going to look like then? Have we done all that we can do to make Cotati be the best that it can? And I think that's kind of the responsibility that you have in these type of positions, and they're lofty. It's kind of hard to live up to that, but I think as I mentioned before, there's a wealth of experience and knowledge in the current leadership. So I feel that that's something that I can definitely learn from those people.
Thank you, Mr. Savage, and thank you for your candid response.
All right, with that, then I think this would be a perfect time to go to public comments. See if we have any feedback from the public.
Looking to our attendees tonight, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use your raise hand icon. Mayor Landman, that will end public comment.
All right, thank you. So I'll bring it back to the council. See, is there any further discussion from any of my colleagues? And I'm not seeing any hands go up. I will make a comment then before we have a motion. I'll just say, I found it interesting. Mr. Savage made a point that's very true and kind of lays in what I'm thinking a little bit. He said, we're all going to be gone. And he mentioned in 75 years. I'll say for the record, if I get another 75 years, Mr. Savage, I'm thrilled. So you've left me in a good mood tonight. But actually, seriously, this is really important. I'd like to take a minute to thank everybody that put their application in. And I think Councilmember Sparks really had luck in this case because she had numerous people, all with excellent qualifications, and was in a very enviable position. The only negative thing being only able to pick one of them. But that gets to the point of there are, as some of my colleagues have put out, potential opportunities in the near and mid and longer term future for this community. And it's our success in this community that I think we've enjoyed in recent years, in this last decade or so, is largely due to strong citizen input and leadership combined with a good staff. And none of us can be here forever. That's not how it should be, and that it won't be. Nobody's indispensable, and it needs new people to step up and lead. The same people can't, won't, and shouldn't do it forever. So that's a long-winded way of encouraging everybody who's watching tonight or everybody who applied to stay involved, keep your eyes and ears open and look for ways, because things can change quickly. I've seen it over the years, and Cotati needs people involved, ready to help lead this community on to the next few decades. So thank you all for what you've done tonight, and hopefully we'll do more and you'll help more in the future. So with it, I'll bring it back, and I would imagine if anybody's going to make this motion to see if we would ratify this, I'm guessing Councilmember Sparks, you might like to do that?
I would love to do the honor, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I move that we ratify the appointment of John Savage to the Planning Commission.
I would be happy to second that motion.
All right, so we have a motion from Councilmember Sparks, a second from Vice Mayor Harvey. We'll ask if we can have a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Ford?
Yes.
Councilmember Sparks?
Yes.
Councilmember Moore?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harvey?
Yes.
Mayor Landman?
Yes. Well, congratulations, Mr. Savage. This is perhaps the shortest meeting you'll ever sit through. So enjoy that, because they'll all be longer after tonight. With that, we are moving now, having completed item 11A, we're moving to item 11B. This is an adoption of a resolution accepting the draft water and sewer rate study and numerous other things, which staff will tell us about as they give us our staff presentation.
Mayor, members of the council, this is Craig Scott, City Engineer, Public Works Director. This item is to consider approving the draft water and sewer rate study and setting a public hearing for June 14th to consider adoption of the 5-year rate program. The city completed a similar study back in 2017, and the last of the programmed rate adjustments was this past July in 2021. As you can imagine, as with any predictions, as time goes on, conditions do change, and it's necessary to check up on the financial plan from time to time. In 2019, for example, the city reevaluated the plan for revised cost estimates for the Laguna Bypass Sewer Pipeline, a major project back in 2019. At that time, an interfund loan was determined to enable the programmed rates to stay effective. Then again in 2020, the 2017 financial plan was reviewed and found to need no changes. At this time, we have reached the end of the 5-year mark and have completed a revision of the 10-year financial plan moving forward, and are proposing a new set of rate adjustments for the 5 years beginning this year. The city's rate consultant, Mark Hildebrand, is here tonight to make the presentation, and he and staff are available afterwards to respond to questions. So Mark, please take it away.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. If we could please post the PowerPoint presentation, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members, for having me this evening. I'm pleased to be presenting the recommendations that I have been working the last several months developing with city staff. I've been asked to keep the presentation relatively brief, so I'll be targeting about a 15-minute presentation, leaving time for questions and answers. Next slide. So tonight we will be going through the financial plans both for your water enterprise and your sewer enterprise. I'll discuss the assumptions that we made in those financial plans with a focus on the capital spending because that generally drives rates, and we'll talk about the proposed rates. We will be looking at a survey that will help compare typical single family bills in Cotati to those of agencies in the region. And then we'll wrap up talking about the project schedule. And ultimately, we will be asking council to direct staff to mail out the Proposition 218 notices for a public hearing to be held in June, and setting a date for that public hearing. Next slide. So before I cover anything else, I think it's really important that the audience understand that the rates that are being proposed this evening all comply with Proposition 218, which is the law in California that governs how utilities such as the water and wastewater utility at Cotati can and are required to charge rates to their customers. And in a nutshell, the water and sewer rates cannot exceed the cost of providing the service. So in other words, there are no revenues to the water and sewer enterprises that are then turned around and used to pay for other services like city hall or police or anything like that. So all of the rate revenue goes directly to providing water and sewer service. There's also a requirement to provide 45-day notice before holding the public hearing, which is what the Proposition 218 notification is for. Next slide. So I'll jump into the water rates. Next slide. First, a quick snapshot of your operating expenses for water. It's just over $2 million, which includes a little bit of debt, but you can see about a quarter of that is purchasing water from Sonoma County Water Agency, second row from the bottom there. You also have numerous staff that are used to run the operation. Next slide. So this is a projection of the capital spending for water over the next 10 years. You can see that over the last 3 years, you've only spent an average of $4,000 per year, which is not very much capital spending at all. And going forward, the average capital spending will be $780,000. So that's quite a big jump in capital spending. It's largely driven by the replacement of the Cypress storage tank, or the Cypress storage tank project, which is scheduled to occur in 2028. If you go to the next slide, it shows the same graph, the same forecast, but it shows how the financial plan is calling to pay for these projects. So in the near term, 2023, you do have enough reserves to cash finance the capital projects in 2023. But then we are proposing to take out an internal loan for the capital spending in 24 and 25, and then taking out a bond or a grant or seeking grant money to pay for that Cypress tank project in 2028. So you can see there's various strategies being used here to, and the purpose of doing this is to reduce or eliminate that spike in capital spending that would, if we tried to cash finance that Cypress project, the rates would really have to spike along with it, and we're trying to avoid that. So typically, when we see really anomalous spending due to really big projects like this, we propose debt financing it in order to spread those costs out over time. Next slide. So this is I'll slow down a little bit on this graph because there's a lot of information here, but this is a 10-year forecast of cash flow for the water enterprise. And in that top graph, what you're seeing is revenues compared to expenses. So in the background, you see your revenues, and the light shaded, I guess it's gray on this screen, is your existing revenue that you have, and the dark green in the backgrounds that increases over time, that's the additional rate revenue that will be collected with the proposed rate increases. The foreground represents your expenses, so the dark blue is your operating expense, the hash blue in the middle is your debt expense, and the light blue at the top is your capital spending, cash funded capital spending. So ultimately what you're trying to do with this top graph is you're trying to get the revenues and the expenses to match each other, which you can see that happens in the out years in 29, 30, 31, 32, the revenues and the expenses pretty much offset. In the lower graph, those are your reserves. So you can see that you're starting with about, the red line represents your actual reserves and forecast reserves. The black line at the bottom represents your minimum reserve target, so the level of reserves that we advise dropping or planning to drop below. And the dashed black line represents your target reserve. So this is the reserve level that we're seeking to end up at over the long haul. And so you can see in the beginning, the red line, we're drawing down on the reserves pretty substantially, going from over $2 million to just below $1 million. And then it builds back up and gets drawn back down over time. And ultimately it ends up at that reserve target out in 31, 32. Next slide. Thank you. So one last slide before I show you the proposed rates. I do want to summarize the things that are driving these rates. The first thing is that when we look back at the 2017 study, that study had it was 5 years ago, and it had a 10-year forecast. And so we looked to see what that study was expecting in terms of rates in this year. And the rates that are being proposed are pretty similar to what that study had anticipated at the time. That study was showing rates a little bit lower than what we're proposing now. And so the rest of the bullets show you what change that was not anticipated by that 2017 study. So first, the water purchase cost from Sonoma Water has been consistently 6% or higher for the last 5 years, and we're expecting it to continue to be 6% per year. So that's well above inflation and not a level of increase that had been anticipated. Utility rates have also doubled. PG&E rates have gone up. And you've also been pumping more groundwater, which causes your utility rates to go up. You added emergency operations and vehicle replacement costs, I believe, in reaction to the recent fires and other emergency programs. And then there has been an increase in contract and chemical costs. So all these things add up and mean that the rates that are being proposed are a little bit higher than what had originally been expected back in 2017. We're also proposing to repay the sewer fund. The loan was taken out from the sewer fund a few years ago to help pay for a capital project. The sewer fund actually needs that money back. Since we're doing these studies together, we are proposing to make a balloon payment of that outstanding debt to the sewer funds, which is also driving the rates for water. Next slide. So here are the proposed rates for the next 5 years. So you can see the current rates are in the second column, and the proposed rates are in the last 5 columns. And rather than linger on this particular slide, I think the next slide, if you could go to that one, shows the information in a format that I think is a bit more usable for this audience. And this is some calculations of how people's bills will be affected by these rates, rate changes in year one. So we're looking at a cross-section of different types of accounts. So in the top, you can see we're looking at single-family homes, 3 different types: low water use, average water use, and high water use. And you can see the current bill, for example, for a low-use single-family home is $71.99. With the proposed rates, that bill would be $76.29, and the increase to their bi-monthly bill would be $4.30, and so the increase per month would be $2.15. And you can kind of go down the row or go down the column there and see how the monthly cost for different types of customers will be affected by these rates. Rate changes, rather. Great. So those are the water rates. Switching gears to the sewer rates. Next slide. These slides will be fairly familiar. So in this case, the sewer operating expenses adds up to $3.3 million. The lion's share of that is the fee that you pay to the Santa Rosa Run sub-regional treatment plant. So you send your wastewater to sub-regional plant to be treated and disposed of. And so you pay for operating and debt service costs over there for $2.1 million. And you can see there's very little existing debt in the sewer enterprise. Next slide. In this case, the capital spending plan was revised. And so what we're looking at here is the initial capital plan that we looked at when we started the study was proposing to go from an average of about $300,000 per year to $517,000 per year. But in looking at the rate increases that this would require, we circled back to the engineering group and city staff and asked them to do their best to take a hard look at the projects and really try to prioritize how those projects would be rolled out, the timing, and to defer projects that weren't essential in the near term. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see this is what's actually being proposed, which is down from the $517,000 per year down to $400,000 per year, and the spending is more spread out. So this is going to allow us to propose rate increases that are more tempered than what had originally would have been required by the original need assessment for capital spending. Next slide. So again, a similar graph to what we saw for water. At the top, you see the revenues versus the expenses, and we're trying to come to that equilibrium where the revenues and the expenses offset. And you can see because of the volatility of the capital spending that even in the out years there, we have some years that are surplus years and other years that are deficit years. But ultimately, in the graph on the bottom, you can see that we are hovering around that target reserve level from 2025 all the way out through 2032. We're either at or just above that target reserve level. So the rate increase drivers on the sewer side are again pretty similar to what had been anticipated by the 2017 study, but a little bit higher. In this case, the differences, the things that were not anticipated by the 2017 study, probably predominantly is there was one unfortunate event a couple of years ago at the sub-regional plant. They replaced a meter that was reading the wastewater that was being delivered by Cotati to the sub-regional plant. And it turns out that the old meter was a little sticky, wasn't reading the flows correctly. And so the new meter is now coming in with a higher flow reading than had historically been read. And so that was an unexpected bump in the bill that you receive from sub-regional due to the improved accuracy of that meter. Those costs, aside from that meter reading change, those costs have also escalated at about 6% per year. And we had previously assumed it would only be 5%. So that, given how big of a part of your budget that is, that adds up, that extra 1%. Just like water, there have been additional emergency operations and vehicle costs, and the contract and chemical costs have also gone up. And finally, the part of the reason that the capital program is what it is because a lot of those projects are trying to keep pace with the street paving program. And when I say that, what I mean is that the city does have a paving program where it's going through and it's fixing streets. And it's a real shame when you go and you fix a street and then 2 or 3 years later you come and you tear that street up to replace a sewer line. And so it's really important to try to take advantage of when a street's being repaved to go in there and take care of utility repairs and replacement of aging pipes and infrastructure, even if it may be a couple of years premature in the long run. It's really the best deal for your ratepayers and your taxpayers to make sure that those two programs are synced up. Next slide. So here are the sewer rates. And again, these numbers are in your packet, and I don't mean to go through them too quickly, but it's if you want to look at them more carefully, you can look at the agenda packet. I'm going to get asked to go to the next slide because, again, this one shows what these rate increases will look like in terms of bills. And so you can see in this case for a single family home with low water use that the current bill is $120.63. The proposed bill would be $131.47 for an increase of about $5.42 per month. Next slide. So this is my last slide of the presentation before we'll move over to Q&A. But this slide is showing what the combined bill for your water and sewer, how it compares to other regional water and wastewater utilities. So you can see that you're currently towards the bottom of the pack, and that these proposed increases do, and on a ranking standpoint, they do increase, move you up to the middle of the pack. But it's also important to note that that group of utilities are really close. It's an essential tie in the middle of that pack. And so you can expect some leapfrogging over the next couple of years as those utilities, which several of them are my client, you can expect them to have similar rate increases coming up. And so you wouldn't expect City Cotati to simply move up in ranking and stay there. You'd expect some movement like this. So really, I think what we see here is that the City Cotati has rates that are very much in line with what an average utility charges in the region. Next slide. So the schedule, today we are giving these recommendations to City Council, and then we would be proposing to, if directed by Council, to mail out the 218 notices by the end of the month, maybe the 22nd. It might be a little earlier than we have to, but we are looking to mail those out by the end of the month. And then we're proposing a date of June 14th for the public hearing, and the rates would actually be implemented the next day on June 15th. So if we could finish on the last slide, and I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Mr. Scott for any closing comments.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, I'd just like to thank Angela Quarter and Damien Obed for assisting in this. It was definitely a team effort. The three of us and Mark Hildebrand spent a lot of the last 2.5, 3 months crunching the numbers and looking at ways to temper the rates. So want to just really show the appreciation for the team effort that it took. And with that, we're here to respond to any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. So I'll look to the council. I'll ask if anybody has any questions. All right, I see Council Member Ford's hand up first, followed by Vice Mayor Harvey.
Thank you, Mayor Lyman, and thank you to our guests and to Craig for the presentation, and for very clearly walking me through everything in a meeting last week. I always get a little nervous when we value engineer capital expenses to keep rates low about what the future ramifications are. And so I'm just wondering if you could walk me through a little bit of how you pared down those capital expenses and whether you're worried about risk we're exposing the city to for further larger costs because of that.
Thank you for that question. I'm actually not an engineer myself, so I'm not in a position to make any determination in that regard. So I'll defer that project to Mr. Scott.
Yes, thank you. So on the water side of things, the big project is the Cypress Road water tank. And we have some discretion on moving that project around. Everybody here can attest to, original plans where it would have been built a few years ago At the same time, not having that storage, which is actually storage with the criteria that's used for designing water systems, what it needs for 1.5 average days of emergency storage plus the fire storage. We are actually below that standard, but at the same time, we have a unique relationship with the water agency where we have a large water tank very close to us. So yes, there is some dissatisfaction with continuing to push that project out, but you know, there is some comfort level as well. And then on the sewer side of things, you saw the initial chart that was put up. That was coming on the heels of a system evaluation where we videotaped 2 miles of sewer, and we had a cost estimate come back from the consultant, and we said, oh, let's get these old pipes replaced in 2 or 3 years. And so that's what we put out there. In reality, spacing those pipes out, those replacement projects out over, I think we put it out over a period of 10 years instead of 3 years. That there is some risk, as there is with everything, but you know, it's not a perfect world. And the sewer pipes are operational today. These are spot repairs that are needed. There's offset pipes. There's areas where the sewer has been corroded rather, with the sulfites, and so the top has been sort of falling down. You can actually see the soils. So there is some value engineering in there. It's not ideal, but I think we're trying to make a happy medium here of tempering rates and getting our capital projects done.
Great, thanks.
Vice Mayor Harvey.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I would like either Craig or the consultant to speak to the comment that was made that over the last 5 years, our water rates have remained over 6%. That is not my my understanding. This is the first time that we've gone over 6%, and Craig and the whole finance group worked really hard to, you know, get us there. But it has been since 2010 was the last time that we saw the rates go over 6%. And Craig has worked with the agency as well as the agency itself. We work very hard to keep it between 4% and 6%. So I am curious to understand why the comment was made that it's remained over 6% for the last 5 years.
I'd like to address that. That unfortunately is a miscue between staff and Mr. Hildebrand. The percent increases have been 3.67, 4.6, 5.3, 3.47, and then we had the 6.06 this year.
Right.
So you're entirely correct. It's
okay.
It must be a combination of other factors, perhaps a drought, less water that we're selling, but yeah, that's. I mean, the Sonoma water rates are a driver to our overall rate. There's no question about that. But it has been under 6% the last few years.
Okay, I just wanted that clarified because I know, as you well know, we've worked really hard to make that happen. So I didn't want, you know, that being out there that they've been above, because we've worked really hard, and I know you've worked very hard. And just like the comment that you made about that balance, they have also had that same balancing act to try and ensure that their infrastructure and their ability to give us water stays in that balance with the rates also. So it's kind of multiple things are balancing in the air. So I wanted to make sure that that got squared away. My questions have to do with the page that are the example of water bill impacts. Are those, how were those arrived at? Are those true ones from our city? Or were these just generic examples that were used?
Those were generic examples that I'm sure you could find somewhere in the billing system, somebody who fits that same description. But I picked a typical meter size and then looked at water use behaviors to come up with the different amount of water so that folks could kind of find themselves in that list as the type of customer that they most identify with.
Okay, thank you for that, because what this page makes an assumption that people that live in multifamily just by nature use a lot less water than a single family home. That may or may not be true, depending upon the actual parcel. You know, some of the complexes have pretty elaborate landscaping, and they are, you know, keeping that lush and green, and they may use equally as much water as a single family residence. And as I calculated this out, this made it seem like, well, if you lived in a multifamily, you always use less. And I was curious as to whether that is statistically how our community is, or is that just a general assumption that's made?
You know, actually, the reason it looks that way is because they generally have two different meters. They'll have a separate irrigation meter for that outdoor. And so the apartment complex itself, the bill that you're looking at on that table would be for the indoor use, and then there'd be a separate irrigation bill.
So Craig, is that consistent with our community, that all of our multifamily dwelling units have separate irrigation units?
I wouldn't say all, but most.
Okay.
So all the new ones that's a requirement. And so there may have been some grandfathered in, but I'd say over 95% are that way with separate irrigation meters.
Well, that's good to hear, because where I'm headed with all of that is I'm consistently concerned that we've lumped multifamily and all the non-residential all together, and they have no tiers. And I understand it's hard to tier that, but there's not a whole lot of incentive when you're paying a rate that is relatively low, and you get that rate no matter what. There's not that incentive like we have in the single family homes. And I just want to be consistent with getting the right behavior. And I don't know how other communities do that, but it seems that they already get a low rate. In addition to getting a low rate, there's no incentive for them to conserve. So can you speak to that?
Sure, Mark. Mark, do you want to take that?
Sure. Yeah. There's no one right way to do it. There are some communities that do have tiered rates for multifamily, and there's plenty others that don't. This particular study did not look at any of the structural components of the rates. We're simply updating the financial plan to make sure that the overall revenue was meeting the financial need. So I think that I can't speak too much to the decisions that went into it back in 2017 when that decision was made, since I didn't do that study. But I think the best we could do in that regard would be in the next study, we could take a closer look, city staff could take a closer look at that decision and make some decisions about whether or not the tiered rates should be extended to other customer classes.
Thank you for that. And in your, since you do a lot of these studies, could you roughly give us percentages on communities that kind of go a flat rate or go tiering?
Tiered versus uniform rate, I would say it's probably 60 or 68% uniform rates where there's no tiered rates, and then maybe 35% tiered rates. It depends on where you are in the state or in the country, but yeah, up here in Northern California, I'd say that it's probably about 35% tiered rates.
Okay, that's great information. I just want to be sure that we're making people do the right things, especially since we're in a drought right now and it doesn't seem to be getting better, and who knows when it will get better. And then so thank you for that. And then my last question is probably for either Craig or Damien, and that's the last time we discussed the water stuff, actually the water and sewer, we discussed moving from bi-monthly to monthly billing. Is that being contemplated at all again?
It's one of those things that's been sort of swirling around, and we occasionally bring it up, but we haven't pulled the trigger on it. It would take a fair amount of planning to do it, and we just haven't gotten to that point.
So we're not planning on doing that in the near future, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, well, I mean, I certainly don't think this calendar year for sure. And it would be a conversation we'd have to have with, with you all, and, kind of figure out all the logistical details of a split like that, and making sure that we're all good moving forward with it.
Great. Thank you for that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And I'll look and see if we have any other hands going up for questions. And not seeing any right now. All right, this is a perfect time for us to go to public comment then on this tonight.
Thank you, Mayor Landman. Looking to our attendees tonight, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use your raise hand icon. Mayor Landman, that will end public comment.
All right, thank you. With that, I'll bring it back then to the council for discussion and see if anybody has any further questions or comments they'd like to make. I see Councilmember Ford.
I'll just say in general, I'm satisfied with I'm satisfied with the rate study, and I'm happy to move forward with sending the 218 letters and things. But Vice Mayor Harvey's comments I agree with her that the next time we do the study, I think we ought to have some discussion about the structural components prior to, 2 weeks before we have to send out the letters, because it's clearly too late to address those right now. And I don't want to get to the same place in 5 years. So I'm not sure how to get that into the mix so that because I agree with her concern that we need to think about how our rate structure incentivizes saving water, frankly. So that might come up at a lot of places, like irrigation meters, tiered according to parcel size or whatever the other options are. I'd like to hear what other options there are in time to actually have that affect the rate study.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Ford. Councilmember Moore, I saw your hand up. Was that and it's down now? Did you have a comment you wanted to make?
No, but if there are no further questions, I would be happy to make a motion on that, unless Vice Mayor Harvey wants to.
Well, I see Vice Mayor Harvey's hand up, so let's take a look.
I will let you make the motion, but I just wanted to not let it get lost in there that it was just a one-line comment in the presentation about emergency services, and I want to make sure that the public is aware that the staff has done really a lot of preparedness for us and the purchasing of things to ensure that we have what we need to manage the water and sewer, the portable equipment and things like that. So I think that that's really important that the staff has done that, because as we well know, we seem to be in a situation now where we're in, year-long droughts and year-long fire seasons. So those things I think are really important for us to have addressed in the long term. That's all.
All right, Councilmember Moore, if you wanted to make a motion, please go ahead at this point.
Thank you, Mayor Landman. I would move that we adopt the resolution accepting the draft water and sewer rate study and directing staff to proceed with the Proposition 218 public noticing process for the proposed water and sewer rate adjustments, and to set a date for the public hearing and adoption of the rates.
All right, thank you for that. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Councilmember Ford. Before we call the vote, I'd just like to make a short comment. I appreciate the efforts to smooth rates. Spreading these costs out over time, we know is the best way to do business. This is something Councilmember and Harvey and I learned very early in our political careers, the importance of, and I think we truly appreciate it. And I think the citizens certainly appreciate it. So I'm happy to support this tonight. I do agree with the concern. I thank Vice Mayor Harvey for bringing it up and Councilmember Moore Ford for underlining it. Taking a look at rate structures, particularly, for example, multifamily tiering, things like that, to make sure we're sending the right messages ahead of time, next time, would be valuable. I think we want to start moving in the appropriate direction there. I suspect that 30-60 or 35-55 split between non-tiered and tiered and multifam, I would guess that smaller amount. The tiered amount is probably newer and probably growing over time. So I suspect that's the best practice and where it's going. But I want to say one thing comes to mind to me, both with water, with the Sonoma County water, and with sewer, with our sub-regional system. It was noted that there's both expectations, at least coming from them, to expect 6% increases as an ongoing practice going forward. And this is a concern for me because it always comes to that balance between what is truly necessary to avoid the evils, like Councilmember Ford mentioned, of deferring maintenance and winding up paying more down the road, and what is just desirable. I think we all know, if we are engineers responsible for maintaining something and divorced from the responsibility of overseeing those costs more so, we probably want to load things up and get them done, just indeed as our staff wanted to do when it looked at projects and felt it would be best to replace sewer pipes over 3 years. But then when they assessed it, said, well, actually, we can stretch those out, and we believe without a problem. This is the challenge, I think, is to deal with both Sonoma County water and sub-regional system. And that's going to take involvement, I think, from our staff, not just our staff, but all municipal staff, I think, certainly with Sonoma County water, as well as everybody involved in the sub-regional system, and also our elected representatives, not just in their council member positions, but those in regional seats to deal with this, because I suspect that hard 6% doesn't have to quite be that high, and that will be the conversation that may be difficult, but I think it's going to have to happen going forward because these costs have crept up well upon regular increases. So we'll see where that goes, but I'm very glad to see that we have, at least for Sonoma County Water, Vice Mayor Harvey still there keeping an eye on that. And you certainly know how to have that conversation, so that makes me feel good about that. So with that, thank you for your patience. We have a motion. We have a second. I will ask for a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Ford?
Yes.
Councilmember Sparks?
Yes.
Councilmember Moore?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harvey?
Yes.
Mayor Landman?
That's a yes. Thank you. All right, let's see. So it is now a little bit after 8 o'clock. We're just over 2 hours in. I wonder if the council would like to take maybe just a short 10-minute break before we come back. Is that, I'm seeing a thumbs up or two. Let's take a 10-minute break. We will come back at 8:19 and resume. Thank you, everybody. All right, I see our colleagues are back and the city manager is back. It is 8:18. So we are still in our regular agenda on our last two items. And the first one is item 11C, and this is nominations for regional commissions and committees on behalf of the Sonoma County Mayors and Council Members Association, as well as the City Selection Committee. So I'll ask for the staff report on that, please.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So we have our Mayors and Council Members Association meeting coming up this Thursday, and that is, well, there's a couple things going on. Aside from the general membership meeting, there's also a board meeting and what's called the City Selection Committee meeting that is going to run first, and then the mayor's board meeting will be right after that. The items before you tonight are three open positions. There's the Airport Land Use Commission, which is a position that we've talked about before, but it still is vacant, and nobody has sent letters in of interest on that. The second one is the Local Agency Formation Commission, LAFCO. And there's one position. It's Councilmember Pam Stafford from Roanoke Park, and she has submitted a letter, which is in the packet. There's also a resolution of support from the city of Petaluma. It's in the packet. And then the last appointment is the RAN board seat, which is the Remote Access Network is what RAN stands for, which is still equally unuseful in terms of knowing what that board does. But there's also a description there that describes what the board is. And it's basically a board that oversees DMV fees that are collected for fingerprinting systems. And that board reviews the revenue received from that vehicle registration fee and then makes decisions about the countywide fingerprinting system. So in other words, usually service contracts, that kind of thing, for vendors that run those systems. And there's no letters received for that one as well. That one does have to be a mayor. It can't just be any council member. That's defined in the, I believe it's in the vehicle code section that sets the board member criteria up. So that is it in a nutshell. I'd be happy to answer any questions. That's where we are with that.
All right, so I'll open up to see if we have any questions from anybody on the council. Vice Mayor Harvey, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, I'm surprised that we again didn't get, I'm not surprised by the RAN one because that one is always difficult to fill, but I am surprised we didn't get an Airport Land Use Commission applicant. Do you know, because I can't remember based upon the bylaws, does this have to go out again, or can there be nominations from the floor?
Well, I think sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Obid, please.
I think the typical process is that nominations are put out, but if you have a couple rounds and nobody puts in any letters of interest, I think it becomes by default almost nomination from the floor if there is one at the City Selection Committee meeting.
So I'll advise my colleagues, whoever's late or doesn't show up may get nominated for something.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I mean, given that, I think that it's important that mayors and council members have representation on this. And so if there is no one else with all the city councils that we have that's willing to do that, I'm certainly willing to sit on that commission.
Well, thank you. That's greatly appreciated. I would be happy to support that. We'll see what we get to when we go there. So if I could get your direction clearly, if somebody else puts their name forward, would you like me to put your name forward, or perhaps let discretion be the better part of valor and not do that?
I would let you use your discretion, but I'm certainly, if no one else is willing, I'm certainly willing and able.
So that sounds like if no one else steps up, you'd be happy to do it. Otherwise,
Yeah.
You have enough work on your plate. Would I understand that correctly?
Exactly.
Perfect. I want to make sure I have that right.
You do.
I appreciate that. Any other questions from my colleagues before I open this to public comment? Seeing none, let's go to public comment on this, please.
Thank you, Mayor Landman. Currently, we have no attendees.
That makes that easy. Thank you. All right. So we're looking to provide me direction. This should be pretty easy. We have no names for Airport Land Use Commission or the RAN so far, other than Councilmember Harvey. And LAFCO is pretty straightforward. We have one position open, and the existing person is asking to run again. So I think it's pretty straightforward, the direction you could give me. I would ask the council if you would, I would like to be able to support Councilmember Stafford. She's been on there for many years. She's currently the chair of LAFCO. I see no reason why she shouldn't continue. And clearly the rest of our colleagues feel the same way because no one is challenging her for that seat. As far as the Airport Land Commission, it turns out that Jack Tibbetts was irreplaceable. Who knew that? But if I could just have if you would allow me the flexibility to respond, for example, for Vice Mayor Harvey, or the same with the RAND district in case somebody volunteers or we can shame somebody into doing it. The flexibility to support that, I would appreciate that. And if we go do a direction like that, I think that's our best chance to get some of this accomplished. Councilmember Moore.
I would support the aforementioned direction.
Thank you. All right. So this is just direction tonight. I'm going to look at the rest of my colleagues one more time, see if we have any more hands up. I'm seeing a thumbs up from Vice Mayor Harvey, Councilmember Sparks, Councilmember Ford. What the heck, I'll do it too. All right, we'll see where we go with that. And thank you very much, Vice Mayor Harvey, for offering to serve. That's greatly appreciated. You provide good service for this city and this county. All right. So that takes care of item C. We are just direction. We need no vote on that. This takes us to item D, which was added. This is a resolution of support for the Highway 116 West Cotati Avenue intersection safety project. So I'll ask Mr. Obid, I believe you might be reading us this report.
Yes, Mayor, members of the council. So, so we kind of talked about it earlier, but I'll just kind of go over the high points and of course happy to answer any questions about it. So a little bit of history. Last year, there was another potential funding opportunity with the federal legislation around infrastructure that ended up never coming to pass. But we did make an attempt to see if we could find some grant funding in that prior iteration of federal infrastructure funding. And so in the process of that, we did garner several support letters from Caltrans, from the CHP, from Rancho Adobe Fire, from, of course, our police department. And ultimately, that didn't go anywhere because the federal infrastructure funds never materialized. But this year, it looks like there's some other opportunities. So, so the one grant that is the subject of this in particular, the grant guidelines came out very last minute, and it wasn't clear until earlier this morning when I heard back from the people that were taking the grant applications that a resolution of the city council supporting it was very crucial in terms of the people reviewing the grant applications. So therefore, it all came together quickly today, and here you have it tonight. But the project, as we described earlier, is essentially a safety project and also a connectivity project to realign West Cotati and 116 so that it's a more normal intersection, signalize it, as well as turn lanes to get people out of the flow of traffic when they're turning, which makes that safer, as described earlier. And then also a variety of bicycle and pedestrian improvements, bike lanes, sidewalks, and that sort of thing that makes it safer and provides some connection there between that neighborhood, West Cotati neighborhood on the south and the north side of 116 and ultimately like the cottages in that area as it develops. And of course, the signal provides a crossing point because it stops the vehicles. So you can actually walk across the highway and not run and hope you don't get hit. So anyway, there's a lot of reasons why the project has been prioritized, and the resolution that's attached would be attached to the grant application, or applications if we have more than one source that we're pursuing. So that's kind of in a nutshell. I'd be happy to answer any further questions about it.
All right. Any questions from the council for the city manager? I'm not seeing any hands go up. Let's go to public. Oh, that's right. Let's double check. I believe we have no participants at this point, and I am seeing none. So we've checked for public comment. There is none. I'll bring it back for discussion with the council. If there's no discussion, so I would be looking for, we need to move a resolution of support for the Highway 116 West Cotati Avenue intersection safety project with the two findings that, one, there's a need to make it immediate action, and two, that this did come to the attention of the city subsequent to the agenda being posted. So that would be the motion I'm looking for.
So moved.
So I'll hear your hand up.
She still beat me to it.
Oh, sorry.
So we have a motion from the Vice Mayor, Councilmember Ford.
But I had a quick question about those two findings. I thought we had to make those findings in order to place the item on the agenda, not in order to adopt the resolution. I don't know if there's any clarity from the attorney about
That's a good question. I'm going to ask our legal representation tonight. Perhaps we don't need to have that, but perhaps that was just for the vote for putting this on. So let me check.
Good evening, Mayor. That's correct. The 2/3 vote was just to take up the item this evening. It is a regular simple majority vote.
So that makes this much easier for us. All we're looking for is somebody to move this resolution. So if you'd amend your motion, Vice Mayor Harvey, to just include that, make it even shorter.
So amended.
And so since you made us get the amendment, Mr. Ford, everybody's looking to you for the second.
You got it.
All right,
Second.
so we have a motion and a second from Councilmember Ford. I'll ask for a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Ford,
Yes.
Councilmember Sparks,
Yes.
Councilmember Moore,
Yes, with fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yes.
Mayor Landman.
And that's a yes with fingers crossed as well. All right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Council. We will all hope that that passes. That would be a very good thing for this community in innumerable ways. So that completes our regular agenda tonight. Let's go to item 12 then, which is our city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So I will try to be brief. If you don't know, the second week of April is National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week, AKA dispatchers. It's a dispatcher appreciation week, the second week of April. And that's the week that we honor our dispatchers for their commitment, service, and their sacrifice. And this year, all the law enforcement agencies in Sonoma County with dispatch centers decorated and brought gifts to their adopted agency dispatch, which I thought was kind of cool. So the Cotati Police Department adopted the Santa Rosa JC Police Department, and basically decorated and brought gifts to them. And the Healdsburg Police Department adopted us. So anyway, that's a fun little factoid if you weren't closely following that as Telecommunicators Appreciation Week. We do have a prescription drug take back day at the end of the month, April 30th, here at the Community Center on 216 East School from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. So it's for unused or old prescription drugs to get them responsibly disposed of and hopefully not in landfills and not in waterways. Just a reminder, everyone here already knows, but the budget study sessions are coming up soon. The first one is April 19th. It's general fund budget study session. May 17th is your capital budget and enterprise funds. So those are around the corner. So looking forward to that. And I've been reporting periodically about this, but Runner Park's roundabout at Commerce is progressively opening up. So there's still in construction, but some lanes are open now. So there is traffic moving through there. It's not, Commerce isn't blocked any longer. So that's good for our businesses out there on Commerce. On the West Side Street project, so we expect the project to be about 95% complete by the end of this week. But there is a section of West Cotati Avenue between Maple and West Cotati Oaks, particularly, that's being problematic. So the issue is that the soils are too sandy there and there's shallow groundwater, making it too soft to compact the subgrade, and concern about damaging utilities if you start trying to compact that loose material. So we're working on alternative methods with the contractor, but just a heads up that when they finish the other paving, that section is going to lag a bit while we get the final engineering fix figured out and approved for the contractor to move forward with. But everything else is wrapping up as we conclude that project. And I don't know if anyone's been out there, but if you haven't, I would highly recommend. We'll maybe wait a week or two once all the construction trucks and cones and stuff are gone. But Richardson Lane looks beautiful, I will say. I've been down that road many times, and there's it's been badly in need of repair, and it looks a lot nicer. And it's actually smooth now, all the way from West School all the way to Thomas Page. So it's all very nice. We're also, while we're finishing up this project, we're also working on our Summer Street maintenance project. So the west side is a reconstruction project, and we're doing that as we're alternating back and forth, keeping our existing streets in good condition while we're working on our streets that are in poor condition, need to be reconstructed. To get to that steady state where we can have hopefully we can go to mostly maintenance program, which will be annually much less expensive, and we just got to do the lift to get there. And the program we're working on for the summer is a lot of slurry seal and sort of minor maintenance kind of projects. Might need the crack seal, dig outs and repair, localized dig outs and repairs and slurry seals, that kind of project. And right now we're looking at a project that's over 3 miles of streets. So we're continuing to chip away at that while we are also working on our reconstruction projects for next year. So the Quick Strike project, which was supposed to be quick, but is taking longer, just because of the various Caltrans, hurdles we have to go through. That should be ready for spring next year. That's La Plaza Streets and West Sierra Avenue. And then we also have another street reconstruction project that we're going to start working on later this summer, probably fall. That will also be next year. The wayfinding project, again, no news really there, except that we're hoping to be largely complete by the end of April. Minus, of course, the interpretive panel, which is kind of on a separate timeline. And then we did just put out to bid the pathway reconstructions for, there's several areas. So the McGinnis pathway, so this is between McGinnis Circle and the bridge there that goes to Lincoln Avenue. And then also the pathway that goes from McGinnis to Marsh. So the Marsh pathway it was asphalt, and it's kind of broken up with roots and so forth. So that's if we get bids back, they're acceptable, and the council authorizes it, then we'd move forward with it. And what that work would do would be to remove that asphalt and smooth, kind of regrade it and use that material that we're using, like on Richardson and also over School Street. That same sort of looks like decomposed granite material instead of the asphalt. And then the same thing on the McGinnis to Bridge side. So right now it's asphalt to dirt to asphalt to some concrete. And it would take all that out and just make it one uniform material across the bridge. Yeah. And then, the Pocket Park. And so Pocket Park, we're doing the pathways. There are some pathways off of the sidewalk using that same decomposed granite material. And then also some other amenities such as benches, bollard lighting, and a water bottle filling station out there. It's a kind of a node there for the trail. It connects a bunch of neighborhoods that connect to the Laguna Trail. So we had a public neighborhood meeting on this, and these were sort of the amenities that were discussed. This isn't a landscape project for Pocket Parks. We're not re-landscaping anything. It's just putting some of these hardscape improvements in. so-called hardscape improvements. And just on some rec news, so we had our annual bunny brunch and egg hunt last weekend, and it was great. We actually put out 1,500 eggs, so the kids had plenty of candy. I'm sure that was a fun night for the parents. And then this Thursday on the 14th, we're delivering bunnygrams to registered households throughout Cotati. This is a basket with stuffed eggs, candy, stuffed animal, a note, personalized note, and other goodies. And then this Friday on the 15th, we're hosting with Sandy Loam our free youth day at the Veranda Flitty Ranch in partnership with Sonoma County Library. So this will be Friday, 3:30 to 5 p.m. The Biblio bus will be there, which is the mobile library. And then children can check out books, tour the ranch, visit the animals. And then we have various STEAM activities for kids. So that is all this week. And then we're also taking registrations for our 4th session of pickleball. So I don't know if, if you don't know, pickleball is the fastest growing sport in the country. Anyway, I like to say that. I have no idea if it's true, but that's what people tell me. So if our registration is any indication, that's probably true, because we opened up an initial registration for it and immediately sold out. We opened a second, that immediately sold out. We opened a third, that sold out pretty quickly, and now we're on our 4th. So these are the pickleball, they're tennis sand pickleball courts at Sunflower Park. And if you're interested, there's spaces left in the 4th session now. So that is a very popular program right now. And then we have a variety of other things going on, other classes, including pre-ballet, children's dance, and music together, and also summer camps, farm camps, gymnastic camps, and other youth theater camps. It's all going on this summer. In the park, we have movies in the park, National Night Out, Kids Day, and many more things. Those are just some of the city events, but we've also had a lot of interest from other people that want to have events in the park. So there's a lot going on in the Plaza Park this summer, in addition to the normal stuff that you would expect, like the farmers market, and SoCo market, of course, is back this year. So there's a lot going on. And with that, I don't know. I think I said I'd make it brief, but that wasn't too brief, but I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
That's a perfect segue. I'm going to ask the council if anybody has any questions for the city manager. I'm not seeing any hands go up just yet. Got a couple for you, City Manager Obid. So telecommunicators, and I would not have known that was dispatchers. I would have thought that was the people that harassed me with the messages about my car warranty or something. And I would not want to appreciate them terribly much, although I appreciate their zeal. But for Telecommunicators Appreciation Week, I wonder if next year perhaps we could agendize a proclamation of support for that. Because I think we know our dispatchers here do a wonderful job, and I think that's true of dispatchers everywhere. I mean, they're not completely unsung heroes, but I don't think that they're sung enough, if that makes any sense. So there might be some value in that. I would ask, I've been following the drama of the surprising road condition, the substrate on West Cotati. And I wonder, I'm sure the Gelati brothers is on this, but if we could just encourage them, if that's going to stay dirt for a while, if they could be a little zealous in keeping that water to keep dust down for the people who live in that stretch, because it's a highly traveled stretch. I think the first few days, everybody driving through there was very careful because it was not really a road anymore, just dirt. That's quickly changing as people get used to it and they're kind of zooming through there. So that would be really helpful. And the last question I wanted to ask you, I like the idea of improvements for Pocket Park. You mentioned some bollard lighting. I'm going to just confirm these are the type of lights that would be low, non-problematic in terms of impacting nighttime light for neighbors or vastly increasing light pollution or anything like that. That would be the only caveat I'd want to make sure we didn't, in trying to make it safer and more attractive, didn't inadvertently make a small nuisance for the people that live by it.
Yeah, the bollard lights are very similar to the ones that are the Vets Park, along the pathway. So they are. So they'd be
low, kind of facing, not really shooting upward terribly much.
Right. They're typically louvered, so they direct light down, and they're maybe 3 feet tall. maybe, I mean, they're not very tall.
I figured that might be the case, but I figured if I thought of it, it wouldn't hurt to ask. So thank you. So I'll look one more time, see if I see anything. Vice Mayor Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Your comment made me think of a question. Damien, I can't remember, but I seem to recall that when we complete West Cotati Avenue, and Mark's comment about speeding made me think of it. Are we installing speed bumps on West Cotati when we get done with that?
Yeah, there's speed bumps are part of the project on West.
That was my recollection, but I couldn't remember. And when Mark mentioned that there was speeding, it made me think to ask to make sure, because that's been asked for quite some time by many of those residents. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Perhaps we should let the speeders enjoy it while they can with those coming, because that will change some habits in it. And this is a very highly traveled area. It's easy for people. You know, when that's your routine and you're in a hurry, people do tend to creep in that direction. I'm sure it's not a purposeful thing generally. But having said that, it's now time to segue to City Council member reports. And I'll see who'd like to lead us off tonight. Councilmember Vice Mayor Harvey, you're talking, so I'll just look right to you because you're on my screen. Would you like to start?
Sure. I attended the Water Advisory Committee meeting, and the budget was approved unanimously by all the cities. So that will be in place. I just wanted to highlight for folks just to kind of keep it, kind of up for people's minds about the water shortage. And that's that right now, as of April 7th, the Lake Sonoma is only at 58.8% full, and Lake Mendocino is only at 54.1%. So we don't have a lot of water. And while we're grateful for the rain we've gotten in the last week, I don't know that it's going to help much. So there'll be, more effort or continued effort with the drought messaging throughout the summer. So people just need to do the best they can to conserve and utilize the programs that are available to help with savings. I also attended, first of all, the North Bay Division had a coffee chat on 323 with Lori Wilson, who was the mayor of Suisun City, who was elected as assembly member. So she talked about, what her plans are in the assembly. And then I got the opportunity on April 6th then to go up and watch her be sworn in. And it was so nice to be in the Capitol. And, I just never ceases to amaze me how beautiful that building is. Because most of the folks are not there because there's a lot of remodeling that's happening in the Capitol. There was really no one in there. So we got to walk around and, again, see some of it. It was beautiful. But yeah, got to participate in her swearing in. So that is all I have for tonight.
Thank you. Councilmember Sparks.
Thank you. I attended the 2x2x2 Education Committee meeting, and we had an excellent presentation from Megan Berger, who was with Redemption House of the Bay Area about human trafficking. And she's also going to be, if you'd like to learn more about her story, she's going to be in the premiere coming up in a couple weeks of the documentary about survivors of sexual assault that's being played at the Luther Burbank Center. But anyway, she came and gave us a presentation about the recognizing the signs of human trafficking. And it was really, just really eye-opening to hear her describe locations in Sonoma County where these things are going on right now. Because so often when we hear about human trafficking, it's in this sort of general national context, but to hear about where it's happening here and what it looks like was just eye-opening. And she actually has developed a 5-hour training that she does for law enforcement, and they've done it for the Roanoke Park Public Safety Department. And had a request that that we try to get SAFE trained up on recognizing the signs of human trafficking. So I passed that on to Damien, but I thought I'd just mention it here that she's available to do training for the Cotati police and also the SAFE teams, which I think would be a great thing. So that's all I had to report tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Sparks. Let's see, I'm not seeing anything from Councilmember Spore. Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Landman. Just a couple of things to report. We had a continuum care meeting since our last council meeting on the 23rd. We have a new chair for the continuum of care. Had a little shakeup on the structure of that. And the new chair is Tom Sweatham from the city of Santa Rosa, former police chief. I think he will make an excellent chair on there. And we're really moving toward making this much more transparent. The request for the information or release of data to give us a greater level of information to make decisions has been received. Previously, it was a little suspect on some of the information we were getting. It was kind of spotty. So that should be coming forth. We just had a recent point in time count of the homeless for the county, and they have not released that data yet. They want to refine that and bring it back to us in the next meeting. So when that comes up, I'll present that. So the COC is moving along and starting to create a greater level of response to the constituents and to all those parties that are involved in there, where before I think it was just a little bit discombobulated. So we had that on the 23rd, and then we had a SERA meeting as well, and we had a safety subcommittee meeting, and don't ask me why, but I'm now chair of the safety subcommittee. And we have suggested to the executive committee of SERA, the insurance pool, that they hire another safety professional to help with the cities and looking at their programs and what they have and what they need, and going forward with that. So that'll go to the executive committee and they can determine if that makes sense. And then, of course, we just had a Chamber of Commerce board meeting earlier today, and two things coming up on that I think are important. The Chamber of Commerce, or the Cotati Music Festival, will be June 25th in the park. We've got 5 or 6 different bands playing there. And then they have a speaker series coming up, which would be on Tuesday the 19th. And I believe the topic on that speaker series is going to be on the green waste and compost and what's appropriate and what's going in the appropriate recycling and what's not, and what our haulers can take and what they can't take, etc. So that'll be next Tuesday. And that's all I have to report right now.
Well, thank you for that. And congratulations or commiserations, whatever the appropriate salutation is on your advancement. Well deserved.
I tried to get out of it and tell them, look, I got less than a year left. And they're like, that's okay.
Yeah, once they got you, that's that, I guess. I have just one thing to share tonight. It's the typical start with bad news, but at least there's some good news interleaved with that. As we well expect, rates for energy will be going up, and the rate we pay for our power, whether it's from PG or some of the clean power, will be going up too. But fortunately for us, as I mentioned before, we've had a problem the last year or so, thanks to the PCIA charges that PG is able to charge us for their previously departing customers that came to us. That's put us in somewhat a difficult position and removed the clear advantage we've had price-wise in the last 2 years. We are actually slightly, just a few percentage points below them, or above them rather, costing a little more. Not a comfortable place for Sonoma Clean Power, because historically it's not just been the cleaner power, but it's also been a slightly better deal. We're back to parity, at least. We are at the same cost as them for this year. So we'll see what the future brings. I hope that direction continues. I would like to see us get a little lower. In the next few years, we'll continue to have some uncertainty, certainly, though, so I don't know. But for now, at least that's good news. There were no additional, this year, the way things worked out, there weren't a lot of extra PCIA charges that were able to be imposed on us. So we get a break. So I hope that's good news for everybody. So with that, that completes city council member reports. Let's take a look and see if we have any attendees. And we do have one attendee. So I am going to open, this is public comment on non-action agenda items. And I'll ask our deputy city clerk if he could open that for us, please.
Thank you, Mayor Landman. Looking to our attendee tonight, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use your raise hand icon. Mayor Landman, that will end public comment.
All right, thank you for that. So we'll bring it back. This takes us to item 15. I'll ask the city manager, do we have any information received after the agenda was posted?
No, Mayor, nothing other than what we've already spoken about.
All right. And I will again disappoint the council by reminding them that there is no closed session tonight. Sorry, guys. But who knows, perhaps next time, cross your fingers. So with that, we are adjourned at 8:54. Thank you very much, everybody, for a productive and interesting evening. I look forward to seeing you all next time. And hopefully this Thursday.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Everybody.